What's going on YouTube? It's Tom here. We're back with another video today. Today's video is in part about the mini Adamas here. That's in the new and improved crewwear from Benchmade, the upgrade over D2 that they had in the previous model. We're also going to be talking about the factory versus sharpened edge on this particular knife and a discussion on burnt factory edges. So let's go ahead and get into it. The inspiration for this video came from a post made by a popular knife Instagram account where he was basically testing multiple knives in crewwear for edge retention on rope. Basically just kind of, trying to give people an idea of how each company's crewwear was going to perform. Two of those knives were production and one was a custom. All of them were on their factory edges, and the only known hardnesses were the custom at 61 and a fixed Adamas at 63 to 65. He said Benchmade told him 64. Benchmade's hardness on their website is 63 to 65. So obviously that's what they're shooting for, is that 64 mark. So a couple issues with that. All of them being on factory edges, there's going to be some fatigue on every single one of them. The only one that might not have quite as much fatigue as the others is the custom, if more care was taken in the grinding of that custom. The first issue with his results was the custom outcutting the Adamas that's supposedly at a much higher hardness, which is kind of odd. I mean, there's more variables to that edge retention result than the hardness, like edge finish, the edge angle, the quality of the heat treat that was done, but something considerably harder like the Adamas is run at, that 63 to 65, should be cutting quite a bit longer. Especially on something like crewwear that's shown in multiple tests, not by myself, but from Gerald, that the harder you run it up to that 63, 64 mark, the edge retention picks up drastically. So I commented on his post basically asking, it'd be interesting to see how they performed after putting 3 or 4 edges on them, but he told me that was a lot of work, so I went ahead and decided to do it myself, since he wasn't willing to do that. So I've done this kind of test once or twice before. It's kind of interesting to see, how edge retention picks up with progressive edges. So I went ahead and ran a test on the factory edge. Now, I want to say this factory edge from Benchmade wasn't the greatest. It was pretty coarse, but it was sharp. It was one of those ones that you could kind of tell probably wasn't going to last too long with it being as coarse as it was. It didn't seem very refined. That initial edge, and I posted a little video of it on Instagram as well, cut 33.83 feet, which I really don't need to say it, but that's absolutely garbage. That is terrible. You're going to get more edge retention out of a Walmart knife than what you got on the factory edge of this mini Adamas. So that's pretty terrible. So next step was to go ahead and sharpen this guy up and put my own edge on it. I went ahead and I sharpened it and matched it to the factory angle, which turned out to be about 25 degrees per side. Didn't take too long to sharpen like that, but this particular section from here to about the start of the curve of the belly apexed a little bit faster, so I had to do a little bit more work out here, which meant that I was flipping the burr back and forth quite a few times throughout here on the flat portion. Then when I got the blade fully apexed, I went ahead and I flipped that burr back and forth 10 different times. I'd flip it to one side and then flip it back, and that counts as one time flipping that burr. So basically what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to simulate multiple sharpenings. So I flipped it back and forth those 10 times to simulate multiple sharpenings. So throughout that, I probably removed more steel from the flat portion here, since that apex first. So let's just keep that in mind. Pretty damn confident that all of that fatigue steel is gone. I mean, that was quite a few times flipping that burr back and forth, especially on the flat portion that I tested this on. I used that normal progression that I use for all my other tests, up to 1,000 grit, diamond, and then strapped on 16 and 4 micron CBN emulsions on leather. Now, I'm not sure if you guys are going to be able to see it, and it might be kind of difficult to see, but I kept it in that 1-inch section. You can kind of see the shiny spot right there because Benchmade Cerakote's pretty bad. Doesn't last very long. But that shiny spot is where I tested it. It's on a small, basically like a 1-inch section. And I got to say, when I sharpened this crewwear, it felt really good. sharpened up super nice, deburred super easily. It came up crisp like normal cruware does. It seems like they're doing this steel pretty well. So I went ahead and I ran the cardboard test again, and this time at 25 degrees per side, I cut 276.7 feet, and you take that compared to the initial result, that's a 717.9% increase that you're seeing from factory edge to this edge. That's huge. And to me, it's kind of difficult to dispute that a burnt or fatigued edge wasn't a factor at play here after a result like that. I mean, that's kind of wild to pick up that much edge retention after some sharpening. About an hour worth of sharpening. Also, when I was sharpening this, I measured the behind the edge thickness before I started, and it was 25 thousandths behind the edge at that 25 degrees per side. After sharpening, it's coming in at 27.5 thousandths behind the edge after sharpening. So I removed a decent amount of steel when I was putting that edge on. I kind of want to show you guys where I stop on these tests because the edge is still sharp and it can still kind of cut paper, especially if you make it. Let me show you guys here. So if I start all the way at the heel and kind of work through that fatigued or broke down spot, you can see it kind of catches a little bit there, but it's still cutting pretty clean. If I start in that damaged section though that I cut with, you can see that it doesn't quite want to start as easily. I can almost make it start a little bit, but that's where I call it. If I have to kind of force it and make it start, that's where I call the test. So with that in mind, let's kind of talk about fatigue steel and burnt edges, because literally every factory edge is going to have some degree of burning. Some are just worse than others. No manufacturer that I know of wet grinds. There's some that take better care than others. Like Chris Reeve tends to take a little bit better care of their edge, and you don't have to remove quite as much steel, but it kind of varies, you know. And in that discussion I had with this particular Instagram page, basically he was saying that a steel like cruware that's easy to sharpen doesn't get fatigued steel or a burnt edge as easily as Max Cement or 10V or something like that. And I mean, it's kind of logical to think that, since those steels are a little bit more difficult to sharpen and might be on the grinder a little bit longer. But when you think about it, when you're forming an edge on a knife, the actual apex is a couple microns wide or even smaller than that. We're talking about an area that small. It heats up so fast that unless you're wet grinding, and I bet even if you are wet grinding, you're going to see a tiny bit of fatiguing there. Laren has an awesome article on the whole thing on his website, knifesteelnerds.com. Basically, even Katra says that virtually every factory knife that they have has that issue. And 75% of the knives that they sharpen have that issue, since they use some sort of a powered sharpener. So, I mean, if you got somebody from a giant corporation saying that it's a known issue and it affects virtually all knives, I don't see how you can dispute that that's not an issue. So when you're forming the bevel on these and you're heating that edge up, you can present two problems. Number one, you're basically heating that edge up and removing the temper from it. So it's going to make that edge softer than what the rest of the blade is going to be. Doing that, it's not going to be quite as stable. It's going to basically blunt or roll a little bit easier. Or in some extreme cases, if you heat it up enough, what it's going to happen is it's going to get so hot that you're basically getting it up to a critical temperature, and then when you stop grinding, as it cools, it's basically air quenching. So you're getting a nice hard edge again, but since it's not tempered down, it's not going to be tempered down after the fact. That steel is hard, but it's very brittle at the edge. It's going to chip out. It's going to flake out. I've seen multiple times this happen, not on my particular knives, but some co-workers' knives that I sharpen, that on a brand new knife, it kind of flakes out on the very edge or chips really easily. But I put one or two edges on it, and that never happens again. So just something to keep in mind. I mean, these knives coming from factories, they're basically trying to pump them out as quick as they can, and there's a factory edge is usable, but honestly, that should be the worst edge that's ever on your knife. If you're a knife user like this, buy some good stones, buy a decent sharpening system, learn how to sharpen, so that way you can get the true performance out of your pocket knives that you're spending your hard-earned money on. Now, about the mini Adamas, this is such a cool little knife. I've always liked the Adamas, shape and profile in general. Just an absolute tank, but it was way too big. The mini Adamas is such a good size. My hand fits it pretty well. It's still kind of thick throughout the handle. It's still like 6/10 of an inch throughout the handle, but it's such a good size. I got a mini Presidio here that is basically identical size to it. So just for a carry size knife, perfect. The jimping actually isn't too aggressive when I was doing all that cutting. If you choke your finger all the way up on top of the little hump here, it's not uncomfortable to cut with. Blade geometry is still a little bit thick for my liking, but might do something about that here in the near future. Pretty impressed with the knife. It's probably one of my favorite purchases here in a while, actually. So with all that being said, I think that's going to do it for this video today, guys. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like down below. Subscribe to continue to see more videos just like this one. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.